Hello, everyone. Today is March 1st. This is the kickoff meeting for the Inclusive Naming Initiative open source Workstream. This is a meeting that is recorded and will be available on the internet. So please be mindful of what you say and do. Please be sure to just be awesome people. I was going to mention something about the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, but that's not the place where we're at right now. So we have in general a short meeting. I would love to ideally make as many of these, as many of our activities async as possible. So I think that what I would love to do is get have everyone have an opportunity to do some introductions and what they're interested in getting out of this initiative overall. So we can either choose who wants to go first, or I can just go around my screen. Let's go around the screen. How about that? Meg, you're first up on my list.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I'm Meg Heisler. I currently work at AT&T. I've only been in the industry for about 3 years, and am mostly working with the Open Infra Foundation through AT&T on different projects, and then have through them found other avenues for some inclusivity work in open source. So yeah, that's about it. Just
Welcome.
looking to bring those things to that, yeah, align all our language.
Welcome again. Dawn, you are up next.
Hi, I'm Dawn Foster. I'm Director of Open Source Community Strategy at VMware. So, and I've been working in open source for 20 plus years. So I've been around for a long time. And inclusivity in general is something that I am pretty passionate about. And it's one of the things that we're looking at, here at VMware and in other projects I'm involved with, and how we can make the language we use more inclusive and make people feel more welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Dawn. Rich.
Hi, my name is Rich Sauls. I'm mainly a security guy. My open source involvement has been with OpenSSL for, I'll say, half again as long as Dawn. How about that? Yeah, I'm really glad to be a part of this. I caught some flack for trying to make OpenSSL language be a little better in some cases, but hopefully contribute some lessons learned. And I'm also involved in the IETF space.
Welcome, Rich. Roger. Roger, you're on mute.
There we go. There had to be one, right? I almost wore the "you're on mute" shirt. I'm Roger Clarice. I'm a product manager at VMware. I've been working in the Kubernetes space for about the last 3 years, both here and at SUSE before. Worked on a bunch of other open source projects in the past, ranging from SendMail to Zen. Inclusion issues and particularly inclusive language has been a strong interest area of mine, and people from CNCF probably will think of me saying, well, what about the pronouns a lot? So.
Awesome. Welcome, Roger. Celeste.
Hi, I'm Celeste. I'm eating nougat, so I apologize for
You want me to move?
being me. I'm a senior technical writer at the CNCF. Spent most of last year working on Kubernetes, and it looks like most of this year working on almost everything else but Kubernetes. And I started the naming working group with Stephen last year, which then kind of has spun into this inclusive naming initiative, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, as a writer, it just really bothers me when people so much of how these naming initiatives as a writer, I think, get executed poorly. And so I wanted to make sure that if we were doing this, we would hopefully do it right.
Welcome, Celeste. Christopher.
Hi, my name is Christopher Rees. I am a federal contractor. I work mostly in the security space as well. And I've previously contributed to several open source projects. Within my work, I do advocate for the use of open source projects, and I am also advocating for more inclusive naming. So that's what brings me to this group.
Welcome, Yuvraj.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Yuvraj, working with Data Pane, and side by side, I'm working with some community like Kubernetes and other CNCF project as a contributor, and here to explore like what guys are doing. And I found it interesting, inclusive naming. That's why I joined it. So let's see.
Welcome, Yuvraj. Karsten.
On my button. Hi, I'm Karsten Wade, and I've got I guess two facets I'm coming from here. So I'm a community architect at Red Hat, and I've spent pretty much all my open source career the last couple of decades at Red Hat, and some of the time I've gotten to work on open source stuff exclusively, as my focus. And so as part of my work in the open source program office, I ended up getting involved in an internal working group we have and deeper into a conscious language working group. And that was basically where my my word focus, and I'm kind of a word nerd as it came from anyway, because that group was part of our word nerd group. So so in terms of the other work stream I'm working on around here, I'm totally interested in the words and really getting in and the meaning behind stuff and so forth. And in terms of the process oriented, coming from the other angle, I'm a member of a project. It's a community of practice around community management called the Open Source Way. And what started out as a guidebook a dozen years ago has just come out with our 2.0 guide. His guidebook just came out last December. And the goal there is to be an upstream for best practices. And one of our best practices, of course, would be to be conscious about the words you use and to pay attention to certain things, and then to be able to reference off to processes and lists of words and best practices from other groups. So in my mind, the Inclusive Naming Initiative is an upstream for the Open Source Way in terms of being able to point for process and for lists of words. So those are the two areas that I'm kind of trying to work on. The project is that's what I'm here for in this work stream, is to help with that sort of thing about how a process is on board, because to me it seems it plugs right into this other work and what we recommend. Hope that makes sense. I haven't tried to encapsulate that before in 60 seconds. I think I did.
Pretty good. Thank you, Karsten. Carolyn.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Van Slyke. I am a developer at Microsoft. I've been doing open source for decades, and specifically with Kubernetes and CNCF for the past like 3 or 4 years.
Welcome, Carolyn. Amy.
I'm Amy Marish. I'm a Principal Technical Marketing Manager at Red Hat. I serve on the Open Infrastructure Foundation Board of Directors and am chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Working Group. And y'all started this about the same time we were working on the foundation's stance and all the documentation changes and everything we're looking to do over in that foundation with all the projects. So it just seemed like a really good idea to come over, be able to merge things. Meg's also a member of the group, though she didn't say it. So if you need anything to come back to OpenStack or Open Infra, you can reach out to either of us.
Awesome. Welcome, Amy. Rich.
Hey, I'm Rich Bowen, and I think I know about half of you. I've been doing technical writing and community development and conferences at the Apache Software Foundation for just over 20 years. Most recently, I'm at Red Hat in the open source program office. And as part of my work at Red Hat, I'm one of the 3 leaders on our conscious language project. We have a leader that focuses on our products and one that focuses on our documentation. And my focus is on the upstreams that Red Hat relies upon. And so this is an obvious group to consolidate our efforts.
Welcome, Rich, and Libby.
There's that mute button. Hi, I'm Libby Merritt. I work on open source evangelism for Nginx, and have been part of the industry and focused on inclusion and the concepts of inclusion for, gosh, over 20 years now. So I'm really happy to be here and excited to be working with all of you.
Welcome, Libby. Okay, last but not least, hi, I'm Stephen Augustus. I am one of the co-founders of the Inclusive Naming Initiative. I lead a few things in Kubernetes, including the working group, the naming working group naming. It's Monday. Okay. So we some background for, I guess, Inclusive Naming Initiative and what we're looking to get out of these work streams explicitly. So we kind of are carving the work streams across two axes. The first is the pillar side or vertical, and the second is program or horizontal. And if you've hung out in Kubernetes, like this is very similar to kind of what we do with the SIG model. So the idea here is that the pillar or vertical work streams would be responsible for discussing the process around and execution of an inclusive naming initiative, small I guess, within your open source project or within your enterprise company or within an SDO, right? So we have various people who are, so we have 3 separate work streams for that. We have various people here who are experts who have built the relationships across time. Love to hear about all of your extensive backgrounds, but really having those conversations within that pillar is the goal of those pillar work streams, right? Then we have the program level work streams, or the horizontal ones, and these essentially cross-cut the initiative, right? These are ones that are meant to enable the work of those pillar work streams, right? So whether it be, I'm going to name this one first because I always name it last, and it is one of the most important. The language work stream, where we actually discuss how, why. The how and why of language and why things might be offensive, what we can do to fix that. The community and tooling work stream, which is really a discussion around, if you think on the Kubernetes or CNCF level, the contributor experience for Kubernetes or contributor strategy for CNCF, where the goal is really intake and how do we welcome new contributors, how do we welcome new contributions overall, right? I have, several of you are working on internal efforts, and maybe you've written a cool tool, maybe you've built a great list of words and explanations, and you want to bring that into this initiative. How do we talk about doing that? So that's the goal of community and tooling. So we've got kind of a shadow admin work stream. It's not quite on the books, but it's everything around the administration of really the tools that we were just talking about. So how do we get Google Groups? How do we get this Zoom account, 1Password, all of that good stuff, all of the infrastructure that's required to support this effort. Then there's marketing, PR, comms. I think we're still settling maybe on a canonical name for that one. But getting the word out about everything that we're doing, and making sure that, things like talking about press releases, right? If a new company joins, a new initiative joins, like how do we talk about that? How do we plan our efforts around different conferences? So, one of our kickoff events was, or our kickoff event was the community meeting at KubeCon NA virtual last year. And we had a great showing for that. I think that continuing to have meetings out in the open like we're doing right now, and being able to publicize that widely is going to bring even more wonderful contributors to this effort. So I will stop chatting for a bit. Does anyone have any questions about some of the work streams? Wow. Okay. Easy peasy. So I think next what a goal for each of these work streams is to figure out what the work stream should be doing. I think that part of the goal of assigning leads to some of this. Assigning leads to each of these work streams is that the work stream would go off and form, and we would have our own ideas about how to execute on the goal that may or may not exist or may not be properly refined as yet. I think that with the open source work stream, Celeste and I have had some opportunity to do this in the Kubernetes community, and the goal there at its start was to ship something bigger, to ship something that could become what it is right now, or what it is becoming. So I think that repeating some of that work could be interesting, but I also don't want to make it necessarily a carbon copy. So I would love to hear some ideas about what specifically you'd like to accomplish for your open source projects.
I'll say something. One of the things we've been working on at Red Hat is advice to people who want to approach an open source project with a request for change. Because we've seen a number of cases where somebody has gone in with a patch and the moral high ground and declared their intention to save the world. And this has gone very badly for them. And we want people to have a good experience with this. There's a couple things. You radiate intent ahead of time. You say, this is what I'm thinking about. You introduce yourself to the community. You make sure that you're known, and you don't just swoop in with a patch and get stomped on and make it difficult for the people that come behind you. And I would like to see advice around this that comes from the wisdom of the people in this group and not just me declaring. So that's something that I would like to see come out of this.
Yeah, and I think we also have experiences of even still being well known in a project and having issues with shipping change. So yeah, one of the goals is definitely to discuss the framework in which to have that conversation, right? I think over time, and especially with the wealth of knowledge and experience that all of you have in your respective open source communities, that you're well positioned to have the conversation, or well positioned to help build a framework to have the conversation. So again, I will stop yapping and get more opinions.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing on that, which is I think the idea of giving an advice piece of documentation to somebody who wants to make a contribution is a really cool idea. One thing that I would emphasize in that particular document is, how do you do that asynchronously? Because it's far easier to project good intent when you can see and hear somebody and read their kind of facial body language. And I think where a lot of these efforts fall flat is somebody, again, just sort of like opens a PR and people feel attacked, whether or not they have the right to, whether or not it's okay, they feel attacked. So yeah, like thinking about that asynchronously as well, I think is a really important one.
Yeah, I think the point that was partially, I was reading what you were typing, Celeste, while Rich was talking, so I might be a little off. But the fact is,
a newcomer who just goes to a community and puts in that PR is going to have a lot more trouble doing so than someone who is already established in the community. So that would definitely be something that is important in those guidelines, is establish yourself. You don't necessarily need to be a core or a maintainer, but just someone that they trust is making good changes and giving good advice. And then when you come across something, maybe it's just one word you're changing in a documentation, but that gets you in and they realize you didn't, cause big problems. You didn't break anything by making that change. And it wasn't a bad change. And they already trusted you because you've been around for a little while. So that is going to be the hard thing for people to just join a community and change. And I think that's where the feeling of being attacked comes in, because you're not already a part of the group.
Yeah. So one thing I just want to put on the agenda, just so that we've got it, is I think the other half of that too is, what if you are the open source community who has decided to take on this big change? How do you coordinate your efforts? Thank you for taking notes, by the way, Karsten.
Yeah, so I would agree that the flip side of that is it should not necessarily be my responsibility as a new contributor to build up all of the karma that's required to make a change that may be massive. It could be a small change, but it could have ripples across. I think with Kubernetes, the fun one is oh, we changed a label. Okay, that's fine, but the label's part of an API, and the API is attached to a deprecation cycle, right? Yada yada yada, right? So you something that could look like a search and replace becomes a year-long project for a team, right? Or even longer, depending on what you're touching. So I think that being able to, one of the fun things that we ran into was the changes were already happening in Kubernetes, right? And having the conversation about creating the framework while the changes are happening, and trying to do that in a constructive manner, and trying to catch the various cases where it's already happening, and be able to have a conversation with the contributor, maybe walk something back, maybe direct them to, I think the trickiest thing is directing them to guidance that doesn't exist yet, right? Or needing to direct them to guidance that doesn't exist yet. So that was one of the fun experiences that we ran into, and I think that was one of the reasons that we made providing that framework, providing a recommendation template, a priority in Kubernetes. So I definitely agree on the build karma in communities, just period, but providing an easy path for people to be able to do that is I think one of our responsibilities as maintainers as well. Celeste.
Rogue suggestion, so take it or leave it. Would providing case studies be helpful of this is how community X made this change, this is what they ran into, and here are maybe some lessons that they learned along the way that if you decide to take on a similar initiative may prove helpful for you.
I like that. I don't know if the developers will care.
Yeah, I don't know
think it would be helpful for the communities to realize the change and what someone else went through. And, these are points to look out for when you're making your changes. Kind of opposite of what Stephen did, Open Infra came up with a stance from the board first. And we got feedback from the community and had lots of meetings before we declared the stance final. And we've also said that timelines and everything are going back to the technical committees for the different projects, because I can say as a member of the board, I want you to change next week, but going back to those APIs, it could take 2 years to do those API changes. And if you're relying on an upstream project for something like Git, for example, you need them to maybe make changes before you can make changes. So that's where also the balance of do the little things you can do and welcome the community and have those discussions, and make plans for the longer changes. We don't want them forgotten. We are going to keep after you, how is your progress? but giving the different projects some ownership of their timelines and how they're making their changes, I think helps with that buy-in.
I think the other thing that these case studies does is two things. One is it shows you that you're not alone. You don't have to go make this case all on your own. You can point to these other influential projects that have already decided this is the right thing. And the other thing is kind of the same thing stated a different way. It shows that this is the way that we are going as an open source community. And you can get on board, or you can look back 5 years from now and say, gee, I wish we weren't so insensitive now.
Yeah, one thing that's possible, we could possibly do, and I think it has to be done carefully to avoid making people dig in their heels, is have a place where open source projects can say, yeah, we did it. It was or wasn't that bad, and maybe it helped, maybe it didn't, but just we tried to do with OpenSSL, Daniel from Curl just said, oh, I'll do that right now. And if we just had a place where we could keep a list of projects, people might be able to realize that, yeah, you're going to be on the wrong side of history. But
Yeah.
again, have to be politically aware, because people who are on the wrong side tend to be digging in their heels.
And I think we could probably learn a lot from some of the original code of conduct discussions, because when codes of conduct first started coming out, they were all of these really political discussions about whether or not you even needed one. And now we've gotten to the point where I would say most projects realize that they need a code of conduct, and it's a fairly simple thing to do. But I think we can learn a lot from maybe some of those discussions we had back in the early days around those codes of conduct. That's a similar dynamic.
So we're
Absolutely
at time.
agree.
Steven, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm loving the conversation, but we are at time. I think that for next up, I want to get an idea of is everyone settled in? Are you connected to Slack, mailing lists, all the good stuff? Is there any help that you need? If you want to ask questions right this second, we have a few minutes, or well, we could stay for a few seconds to try to answer those. If not, we are on Slack. We are on the public mailing list. If you are not connected to any of those, feel free to reach out to me. I think that given that you've made it here, you have access to at least a few of those things. But if you have any questions, please let us know. Let's keep the conversation going. All right, take it easy, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.